motto. George's Building Supplies Fire Doors and Frames is a proud family-owned Australian business supplying building products for over 45 years. As we continue to grow, we have made it our mission to provide our clients consistent quality, safety, and the highest level of service, reliability, and expertise in the industry. Whatever the project, big or small, we take care of everything frames and doors. With experience across over 100 projects, our track record speaks for itself. Contact GBS today for all your door and frame needs on 9624 1283 or email us on info@gbsfiredoors.com.au.
Old Time Bakery is proud to announce the release of the first gluten-free Lebanese bread to hit the market, specializing in gluten-free wraps and pizza bases. For more information, please contact Old Time Bakery on 9708 4442 or visit their website on www.oldtimebakery.com.au. The Voice of Charity would like to thank our current sponsors for their ongoing support. And if you would like to become one of our sponsors, please contact the Voice of Charity office on 9625 6111 or email us on voc@voc.org.au.
علمتينا المحبة سمعتينا حبي حبي علمتينا المحبة لا تخافي من هبوب الريح عن حبك ما رح ننسيح لا تخافي من هبوب الريح عن حبك ما رح ننسيح صوتك من صوت المسيح تبقي صوت المحبة.
In this era of grave spiritual crisis, it is not enough to simply know about your Catholic faith. That is why we need a Catholic Toolbox to equip us with the practical skills necessary to live our Catholic faith to reach our ultimate goal, which is heaven for all eternity. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. for the Catholic Toolbox as we hand you the tools to go forth, live the faith, and change our modern world today. Live on the Voice of Charity.
And welcome back to another week on the Catholic Toolbox, the art of practical Catholicism. I'm your host and founder, George Manassa, here as we equip you with practical tools to live your faith in our modern world of today. And this week, we're speaking about sacred music. I think I had a series on sacred music, and we're continuing it because it's an important topic to discuss after the Second Vatican Council and in today's parish life. So, here I have Gregory Tondys, good friend of mine. Welcome to the show.
Pleased to be here, George.
What are we speaking about?
Sacred music.
We actually, before the show, you asked me. No, I asked you. I said, what are we speaking about?
Yeah.
Just to test you. And you said sacred music, of course. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you.
Yeah.
Yourself?
It's great to have you. It's always great
thank
to
you
catch
very
up
much.
with you.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And you're a director, you're the director of music for the Parramatta Diocese's Latin Mass chaplaincy.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and how long have you been in that position?
Oh, very good question. I actually really don't know. It's probably
It's been a while.
6 or 7 years. Yeah. Previously, I was at Lewisham.
Yeah, Maternal Heart of Mary.
Which is a fair distance from. I live out in this diocese out
Yes.
west, and so it was sort of very difficult, sort of going in there
Yeah.
all the time. So I sort of retired from there. Took a sort of break, helped out in my normal Nova Sordo parish.
Yeah.
And then they needed help within the Parramatta FSSP. Even though
Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter.
That's
for
correct.
those who are listening, who basically run the chaplaincy here
in
the
this
Diocese
diocese,
of
yeah.
Parramatta.
Father Cypher is the official chaplain.
Big shout out to Father Cypher. He's actually been on the show. We've done an episode on the Latin Mass. So don't forget to look out for that on our podcast. So that is the Latin Mass by Father Damon Cypher. And big shout out to him and the Latin Mass chaplaincy here in Parramatta, which is thriving.
Thank you.
It's
Yeah, it's definitely growing, yes.
It's absolutely booming. Every time you go to Mass out in Blacktown, in
That's
the
correct.
Croatian Catholic
The hall
hall,
there.
and a big shout out to them. You know, they're very gracious in hosting the Latin Mass chaplaincy, and it's just booming.
It
you know,
is.
families.
Lots
and
of families, yeah.
You know, 60% of the parish the congregation seems to be families.
That's exactly right. That's one thing that a lot of newcomers attending at Blacktown are surprised at the amount of families and young kids there are there at Mass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a sign of growth, a sign of
Yeah.
real growth.
Well, I've certainly over the years I've seen it grow, and you know, originally we were out in a small little church at Mulgoa.
Yes, yeah, I remember.
Which was
going
only
there.
very small, and then after a couple of years there, we'd already outgrown the church there. Nearly half the people stood outside the church.
Wow.
And yeah, and then of course COVID hit. Then once things the restrictions sort of dropped, we had to find somewhere, you know, larger that we could move into, and I'm sure Father Cypher is the person to sort of ask how that all happened. But yeah, we ended up at Blacktown, a Croatian centre there. They've got a very large hall, a very nice looking hall actually.
It's a very
very
good
nice
hall.
chandeliers and things like that. Looks a bit churchy.
It's fit for purpose.
Yes, and yeah, we have Mass there every Sunday at 10 a.m, a sung Mass every
You know,
Sunday.
and with the intention, you know, down the track to build a church.
Yeah, well, that's right. I think that's what Father Cypher mentioned when he was on here about...
But churches do take, you know, generations
That's
to sort of
correct.
build, and there needs to be, you know, stability and over time, you know.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a quick process.
And I saw that because I was involved in Lewisham right from the beginning, back in
Maternal Heart of Mary.
88,
Yeah.
when the Motu Proprio Ecclesiae Dei came out. And
By
it
John
was
Paul
just
II.
John Paul II, that's
Yes.
correct. And it started with just a handful of people, and now it's grown into a huge church, a community run by the fraternity. I think they have 3 masses on Sunday.
Just to fit the demand.
That's exactly
they
right.
had to add an extra mass just to fit the amount of people.
That's
because
correct, yeah.
If you don't get there 15 minutes before, you're not getting a seat.
That's right, yeah.
Minimum 15 minutes before you. This is a great problem to have. Growth, and a lot of young people in the Latin Mass, and which brings us to our topic, which is part of the Latin Mass and part of a lot of other parishes who are trying to revive sacred music, especially cathedrals.
Yes.
It's in a lot of dioceses, it's always the cathedral that does sacred music, maybe a few parishes, and the Latin Mass.
That's right, yes.
Or it's the cathedral and the Latin Mass. Those are the common denominators.
Yeah, correct.
In a lot of dioceses. And let's speak about sacred music. Why is sacred music important? Why is we were speaking about church music, and sacred music. What's the difference?
I guess
what's the big deal?
I guess the first thing that the church has always talked about, that the music is an integral part of the liturgy.
Yeah.
And that is certainly the case you see in all the Eastern rites, where the music and the liturgy go hand in hand, and even with the Orthodox, that there in some forms there is no form of the recited liturgy, so to speak. It's always expected to be sung.
So for our Maronite listeners, as they would notice, everything is sung in the liturgy. Nothing is really spoken. Everything is sung. Byzantine listeners, everything is sung. All the other Eastern rites. Like
That's correct,
said.
yeah. The same is with the West. But as the growth of priests occur and priests saying private masses, hence you had masses that were not sort of sung, but still all main masses, certainly in the early times, and even up until the council within Europe at least. Yeah. Leaving out places like Ireland where there was persecution, goes into a bit of complex thing there. The main masses were always sung. And also you had the Mass as well as being sung. You had Vespers on Sunday, which was always sung by people. So people would rock up at church on Sunday morning for sung Mass, and then rock up again in the afternoon for, for Vespers as well. But, unfortunately, that's sort of fallen away in a lot of places. Certainly in the Anglo-Saxon world, music in the liturgy, has been a bit of a problem. There is that, certainly for Australia and America, where Catholicism was predominantly brought to our shores by the Irish clergy. Yeah. And of course, Ireland was, under persecution. Yeah. So they weren't able to, have sung liturgies, as was the case, say, in, mainland Europe. And that caused a bit of, certainly in America, there was, you'll come across a lot of places where you've got the German church, the Polish church, and the reason why is because they did everything sung, while the normal diocesan church was just low mass and maybe hymns, and not even hymns in some places. Yeah, so except it's not cathedrals.
As if everybody was singing everything.
That's correct.
Yeah. And it's important to note that the monastics throughout the Middle Ages were the keepers of the musical tradition. It wasn't every parish you went to.
And they still are today, because it's actually, certainly here in Australia, when the Schola was formed at the Maternal Heart at Lewisham, we turned to the monastic tradition. We went to France, we went to places like La Barou, where there are traditional Benedictine monks still singing all the office, singing Mass and things like that. We went there to learn off them.
So they
tradition.
Went there to learn.
Yeah. I even went there back in, I think it was 1991. Actually, this week, I was there in September 91, I think it was. I went to France, to Le Barou, to spend a couple of weeks there learning the chant and
That's amazing.
Learning the tradition.
So you went out to some cloistered monastery in southern France.
That's correct.
With monks and they're chanting everything.
Correct.
That beautiful chant, that Gregorian chant.
Correct.
And you went there to learn off them.
That's correct.
Bring something back. Yes. To the local parish.
Yeah, and we all did.
How beautiful is that? You never I've never heard anybody that's gone out to the actual monasteries and come back.
There's not many people, unfortunately, after the council, even though the council documents spoke about the importance of Gregorian chant and it should have pride of place within the liturgy, unfortunately, in practice, it didn't really occur in many places. So certainly for us here in Australia, there was only probably a handful of people that had some chant knowledge, like David Malloy.
He actually, he was one of my teachers.
Oh, there you go.
In high school.
Yes. So
he was excellent.
He's a very good chant expert as well.
Yeah, he's one of the great experts in Australia.
Yeah, very good organist.
It was a privilege to actually learn from him at school, and a big shout out to him.
I actually forgot he taught at
Paris Park.
Yes.
He did. And let's. Where do we start with this? I don't know where to start. Okay, so people say Vatican II got rid of the music, and we have to use modern music now.
Well, that's not the case.
Okay, so what are the documents actually say?
Okay, so you got in Sacrosanctum Concilium, which is the document or the constitution of sacred liturgy, specifically says that chant is to be held in pride of place. It is the music Gregorian chant. Is to be held in pride of place. Then after that, it mentions that sacred polyphony is also to be to be fostered.
What
and,
is
and
polyphony for our listeners who have never heard such a word?
Okay, so polyphony. Okay, first off, chant is sung where there's only just one voice or one melody.
One melody
with
together.
everybody singing the same melody together.
Exactly. Yeah.
In musical terms, we call that. So it's mono. It's only one. One. What do you call it? One voice. Now polyphony is where there are multiple voices or melodies on top of each other.
Exactly.
But they align.
But
they align in a way that it's all harmonically nice together.
Yeah.
So this is something that sort of eventually evolved over centuries after the medieval period, where some musicologists say that, you know, by mistake somebody started singing the wrong melody at the wrong time, and then they sort of discovered that they could sing things together, you know, in parallels, singing a different note, and then add another note, and that's what eventually developed into
So somebody must
sacred
have
polyphony.
sang out of tune and it blended.
Or something
together.
like that,
Said,
but they sang out of
bad.
tune in a way that it was still in tune with the original singer.
And they
yes.
said, aha, this doesn't sound too bad.
That's correct, yeah.
So why don't we all sing a little bit out of tune and blend it together, and then you get this beautiful choral
So it's
music.
it's something that happened organically over
Yeah.
you know, a period of, you know, a couple of centuries.
It's not as if the music from the early church, the apostles were chanting.
That's correct.
The early
So-
church fathers were chanting, and it developed.
We've got to remember that the
organically.
Gregorian chant had its origins in the Jewish temple.
Oh wow!
Musicologists will argue different things. Okay, we don't have a time machine, we can't go back. But there are so many melodies within the Jewish tradition and the Catholic tradition which are similar. You can find recordings on YouTube of, say, a Jewish cantor singing, say, Psalm 118, and then respective monks singing the same psalm, and you can see that the origins of the melody is the same. The psalm tone, for instance, is you know, has come from there. There are certain lamentations within the Catholic tradition they're used during Holy Week,
Which is tenebrae.
That's correct, yeah.
The office of tenebrae.
So a lot of those melodies can be found within the Jewish tradition. I did a little bit of research prior to this show, and I found that unfortunately too within the Jewish tradition, the tradition has sort of slightly dropped away in the last several decades, and there's only a small people who are experts in their chant as well. So.
Because you have the Lamentations of Jeremiah.
That's correct.
You know, Jerusalem,
yeah.
Jerusalem,
That's right.
return to the Lord your God.
That's correct. So, yeah, so we've got to remember that the chant has its origins within the temple, and we've kept that tradition going within the church, and that's one of the reasons why the church over centuries has always stood up for the chant. That the chant is important. That, you know, in many you'll find sort of many saints will sort of mention, you know, we sing the same chants that our Lord, you know, may have sung,
Yeah.
and things like that. So it sort of goes back to that sort of tradition.
And there's some people who argue, well, what's the big deal about music? What's the big fuss about, you know, if we use something modern and something that developed, as you said, this music wasn't just composed yesterday by somebody on Spotify.
That's correct.
This wasn't composed maybe 50 years ago. This wasn't composed 100 years ago. This was from the temple
Correct.
and developed organically.
That's correct.
The term develop organically is very important
Yes.
because it develops organically in what we call the sensus fidelium, in the lived experience of the church.
Correct.
People adapt it as certain monks are praying or saints who are praying. They may have sang in a certain way that expressed their prayer.
Correct.
And they did it slowly over time and modified it bit by bit. It wasn't just a manufactured,
That's
fabricated
correct.
product.
And that's one of the things too that the church always, through our tradition, has always said that the chant has been given to us by God.
Wow.
So it's divinely inspired. Now with the chant, we don't. With lots of other music, we have, written by J.S. Bach or written by Mozart or whatever. With the chant,
which are beautiful.
With the chant, we don't know who wrote them. There are only a handful of pieces that we happen to know throughout history that, because of a certain thing that they were composed by. But even in the chant books, there's no composers written down.
So Gregorian chant doesn't have an original author.
No.
Even from antiquity.
No, we don't know.
So it's
and
just...
the church has always sort of said that it's
Wow.
divinely inspired, the chant.
Wow.
And I guess that leads into the other question that you were sort of pushing me towards, the difference between, liturgical music or sacred music and religious music.
Exactly.
And this is partly where the church, in its documents, has sort of mentioned that, that this divinely inspired music is for worship, while other religious music is certainly important and can be used, especially good for evangelization, but it has a different purpose.
Yeah.
It's for us.
Yeah.
While the other music is for God, and to bring us. And also the chant is music that we don't hear every day.
Yeah.
Heaven is not something that's every day. It's to sort of lift us out of our earthly or worldly thing, that it's something beyond this world. And that's where, the chant, especially, the chant is always promoted by the church as, being something that's sort of, something that's not worldly. It's specifically, it's specifically, for ritual or sacred or liturgical purposes.
And you provided the context for that it developed organically. We
Correct.
don't have an author. We don't know
That's
who.
correct.
It wasn't a fabricated product.
Correct.
Not that it's bad to have something fabricated or composed.
No, that's correct.
But it should be given the priority of place within the Latin rites context.
That's correct.
Because it developed organically from the temple and was adapted over time.
Correct.
Imagine for 2,000 years, and it came from the temple, and 2,000 years of people singing it over 2,000 years, generations, adding that little bit of touch, modifying
That's
it.
correct.
Monks praying with
We're not
this.
singing it exactly the same way as it was in the temple because, as we know,
Yeah.
things change and, adaptations occur during...
But the adaptation didn't happen overnight.
That's correct too.
It happened,
And also they weren't conscious decisions of saying, we're going to decide to change this like this. It's just happened organically.
It just happens organically. Because essentially, and this is important, because people that say, what's the big deal? And I used to be one of those people. I didn't understand, I think, at the time, the importance of liturgical music. This was the prayer of the monks, of the saints, who were doing it day in, day out. And that's what gave it the adaptation, the fact that they were living it, and it molded the chant.
Correct.
There's something really divine about it.
Yes, that's right, and that's what the church
It's a lived experience.
That's church has always sort of mentioned or implied that the chant is something divine.
It's important to get your head around that, I think.
Yeah.
Really, it's to get your head around.
And that's also why all the popes, including Pope Francis, have said the importance of the chant, and that all other liturgical music should always look at the chant as being the first, and even modern compositions, both Pope Francis and Pope John Paul II, I'm sure Benedict XVI also mentioned that the composers should look at the chant and use the chant as the model or the paradigm of composing modern works. I'm not against modern music or anything like that. Everything has its place, but the church has always sort of said that the chant is the most important. It is the norm, the musical norm of the church, the Roman Rite, that is.
Of the Roman Rite,
yes,
of course,
We're just when we're talking here, the church, we're talking in regards to the...
Not every rite. This is
not
just
every
the context of the Roman Rite, which covers most Catholics in the world.
Yes, true.
So it's somewhat relevant to most Catholics.
Yeah, and other usages within the Roman Rite.
Within the Roman Rite.
Yeah, we sort of mentioned that, there's like, there's Carthusian, there's, Dominican, there are different usages within the Roman Rite, and they all use Gregorian chants. So.
It's absolutely beautiful, Gregorian chant. And what else do we want to get into now in the sequence of things? How are we developing organically into this episode?
Okay,
I know you have some stuff from the documents.
yeah,
themselves.
we sort of covered a lot of that. I guess
And the documents are beautiful.
That's correct.
Sacrosanctum Concilium
I
is
think
really
one of the
beautiful.
misconceptions is, if we go back, is that after the council threw everything out. It's not the case.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Certainly musically, the general instructions of the Missal, and also Sacrosanctum Concilium, as we mentioned before, mentions the importance of the chant. The chant is the official music of the Catholic Church. Yeah. Secondly, sacred polyphony is to be held in high regard, and the pipe organ is to be promoted.
And you're an organist.
Well, I play the organ. I wouldn't say
So
I'm
you
an
play
official
the organ.
organist. I do play the organ.
Where did the organ come from? How did it develop? I actually don't know the story.
Okay, I'm probably not necessarily, even though I play the organ.
Just give us a snapshot.
It's also
I don't know.
It's also something that predates, that goes back to BC times.
Wow.
And it has its connections. I think some of the early organs that are mentioned in documents are found, I think, in Greek texts and things like that, using water to provide, or to provide the wind to blow air into the bellows, which then in turn blows air into pipes, which make music. And I'm guessing they were quite crude instruments, if you're sort of going back those times. And then, over centuries, the instrument developed more and more pipes. Keyboards, proper keyboards as we know them today, started developing. I think that's probably around about the late 1400s, early 1500s. The keyboard, as we know, like if somebody plays a piano or has a piano at home, that's the keyboard. In that format, sort of has existed from that time, and then the instrument, has developed over time. I think for many centuries it was one of the most complex mechanical devices that a human had ever built.
Wow.
I know a lot of times that people sort of talk about the clock and things like that, but the organ predates the clock, and there's lots of the mechanical workings of the organ is something that's quite amazing. And not getting into the complex things of an organ, there are different types of organ. Probably the most basic is what's called a mechanical action organ. So when you press the key, there's mechanical action that goes from the key up further through to the organ to eventually pull down a clapper underneath the slide, which allows air to go into a pipe.
Wow.
And now that sort of that mechanical action or working is something that's been used in the organ for centuries and centuries. It could even be more than 1,000 years or something like that. So that sort of and when you go to Europe and you see some of these huge instruments, and it's all mechanical action. So when the organist is there, he pulls out a stop, mechanical, wooden rollers and slides, pulls something, and it pulls another one, then actuates another thing, and it goes through all it's something sort of, how did somebody think up, something like that, the engineering, mastery, involved in it. It's something quite amazing or whatever. So.
Well, my parish, St Patrick's Cathedral, Parramatta, is a very impressive organ, imported from the United Kingdom.
Yes.
And it's just magnificent. The look of the organ. It seems it gives that divine.
It does, and
there's something divine about it.
Well, that's one of the. That's mentioned in the documents. I don't think it's mentioned in the Sacrosanctum Concilium, but it may be mentioned in an earlier document called Musicum Sacram, where it mentions that the organ has the ability to create so many different musical emotions, from the loudest sound, because it is the loudest instrument, to something so soft that you could hardly hear. The organ has that ability to do that. And that's
I just love when you're at St Patrick's Cathedral, Parramatta, and it's the vigil. Easter Vigil, and then they just
at the Gloria.
at the
or
Gloria,
just before, yeah,
and it just the whole cathedral shakes.
Yeah.
It's just something grand about it.
Yeah, it is.
Something.
It's
It's like angels, announcing God's presence. It's like a trumpety.
In musical circles, it's known as the king of instruments. I think Beethoven may have coined that phrase or something like that.
Yeah.
Because, it's an instrument that is able to do so many different things that many other instruments can't do. And also, it can hold and lead a full congregation of singing without amplification. We have these days, microphones and things that we can amplify sound.
Yeah.
But prior to that, say when we go back, 60, 70 years, there was no form of amplification. That was the only instrument that was able to carry through a large building, with the singing and things like that. So, and that's probably one of the reasons why the church and then all other denominations have kept on the organ as their primary instrument.
Yeah, there's just something divine about it, and especially because if we harken back to what is the Mass is the representation of the sacrifice on Calvary.
Correct.
It's the engagement with the heavenly liturgies. So we're cosmologically, ontologically zapping into heaven, and we're participating in the heavenly sacrifice, and within the heavenly worship, we're actually talk about a time machine. We're going right into that at Mass,
and that's one of the reasons why the church uses chant, is because of that divine. Yeah.
So our ritual here on earth needs to resemble. We need to create the atmosphere that actually is in sync with what's going on in heaven.
Correct.
If we use modern contemporary music, doesn't really foster what's happening in heaven, that contemplation, that sacredness, that solemnity.
Correct.
What's wrong with
it's quite interesting. There's been a few studies done, and I spoke to a couple of different musicians because a couple of things have popped up on good old YouTube in recent years.
There's a lot of things that pop up on YouTube.
That's a lot of bad things and a lot of good things too, where some religious music. One of the pieces was Allegri's Miserere, which has which is probably one of the most sublime polyphonic pieces. Plus, it's mixed with there is chant and polyphony. It alternates between the two. It's played to a group of people that don't know Western civilization, don't understand the music, never heard that style of music before. It's in Latin, so they don't understand Latin.
Yeah.
But yet the four gentlemen that are listening to it, all of them straight away go, "This is something divine.
Yes.
This is to do with God."
Yeah.
Even without explaining to them what the piece was, they would just play the piece that straight away it was like they knew it had to do with something spiritual.
It spoke of theology, the lex orandi, lex credendi.
Yeah, just the that's that's one of the things that music has to be.
I'd love to do a test. Play, your Allegri's Miserere or some polyphony like a Salvata Raimondi or some Gregorian chant.
Yep.
And then play more contemporary, let's say, music. And just this, it's interesting. It's debatable, but to see the observation of people who aren't religious, what's the impression?
Well, it has been done. So I know that it's been done in parts of Asia and with people from Africa as well that haven't had any connection with Western culture.
Yeah.
And from the different people I spoke to that knew of these different, studies, that every time that they played something like polyphony or chant, that they instinctively see it as something beyond this world. It's not earthly music. They see it something as from the angels or something like that. Well, then they played something like Mozart or Bach, which and they were happy and joyful, but it didn't give them the same sense of sacredness as, say, the chant or polyphony.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's sort of interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting, just the observation.
That's just, I guess, just human, what do you call it, sociology. So
it's empirical data. It's good. It's some good empirical data.
Yeah.
Observation. What do people observe? Look, the Mass requires contemplation. Objectively, we have to contemplate and immerse ourselves. What's going to foster that contemplation? That clothes the liturgical ritual that's happening there, because the Mass is a liturgical ritual. We're participating in that spiritually, and the music sort of developed organically to support that.
It plays into that, or that's exactly, support is probably a better word.
Exactly, it's like having playing my 30th for next year.
Okay.
My wife or kid, I think, says that. I won't speak for her, but says that. I don't know if she finds it very fun, but it's all done now anyway. So,
Yeah.
but I was thinking about what kind of music, if you're having a party. I mean, some people might want to have a modern, outdoor casual barbecue or party. You're not going to be playing polyphony and sacred music.
That's correct. Yeah.
You go to a bar or a hotel bar or hotel lounge. You don't want to hear obviously you're not going to hear the Kaji Shat Aloha. Is that right, John? John's laughing. Which is the Transigion.
Oh, okay, yes.
In the Maronite.
In the Maronite, right, yeah.
When you go to Mass and there's that sacred action.
That's correct.
Conversely.
That's right, yeah. It's supposed to be something different from every
that
day.
Suits the liturgy,
yeah.
the
And I think
that
also you had on a couple of months back or a month back in regards to the ordinariate.
Yes.
And he was speaking.
Father Stephen Hill.
And he was speaking in regards to the language used within that.
Sacral language.
It's the same. It's the same thing here. It's it's not the same language that's used every day. It's the same thing here. It's not the same music that's used every day. It's not that common sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a remarkable thing. It's a remarkable thing to note. But language makes a difference. Music makes a difference.
And the arguments for them are all the same arguments in regards to, sacrality of the nature of the language or the music or whatever.
Yeah.
So and the organic growth. They all have these things in common.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what's actually interesting is I just forgot the gym, as well. When you go to the gym and you're struggling to work out, there's certain types of music that needs to play in sync with, keeping you through to make it through that workout. I have my playlist for the gym.
Yeah.
But so liturgy-wise,
the
music must be in sync, and that's been done over thousands of years.
Correct,
it's been done organically over thousands of years. It's not like we have to reinvent the wheel.
That's right. I mean, even with the Novus Ordo, we have a book which is called the Gradual.
Yeah.
Pardon me, which is a book that's existed for centuries.
The Graduale.
The Graduale, yeah. And in it, it has the corresponding chants for every particular Sunday of the year.
Yeah.
For instance, the introit corresponds to the what most people probably know as the entrant antiphon, for instance, at Mass.
Yeah.
So for that Sunday, and that's what for instance, the introit, which is the introit, meaning to entrance or beginning as.
God, whom giveth joy to my youth.
Yeah. And this book still exists today. It's been adapted for the current liturgy because the Sundays have been slightly shuffled around compared to the old schedule of, say, Sundays or whatever.
Yeah.
And there is a book out there, the Graduale Romanum, which has the chants for every particular Mass.
So there's certain chants that develop throughout the year for seasons.
That's correct. Yes.
That are more suitable. So that's because they were living that out for thousands of years.
Yeah. So you have certain chants which are specific to a particular Mass.
Yeah.
Like it's always for instance you've probably heard people say Laetare Sunday.
Yeah.
Or Gaudete Sunday. Well, Laetare is the first word of the introit.
Yes.
For the fourth Sunday of Lent. That's where the name comes from. Or the Requiem.
Yeah.
It's the first word of the introit, the entrance antiphon for the Mass for the funeral Mass. Or Gaudete Sunday, which was the third Sunday of what do you call it? Advent.
Advent, yeah.
So there are specific chants set down for specific days, but then there are chants which are seasonal. So like you've probably heard of the Attende Domine, which is sung during Advent. And you'll hear that all over the place. Parramatta Cathedral will sing it, St Mary's Cathedral will sing it. You'll hear it in Rome if you watch the papal masses. You'll hear it at at Blacktown. You'll hear it at Lewisham, and you'll hear it at probably nearly every Latin Mass.
Yeah,
around the world.
Or cathedral. If you don't have a Latin Mass or a parish that does sing sacred music, you can always go to your cathedral. Here in Sydney, we have St Patrick's Cathedral, Parramatta. We have St Mary's Cathedral, Sydney. Yep. Usually it's the cathedrals that have sacred music, and then correspondingly, other parishes who've implemented this. Let's speak about what went wrong after the Second Vatican Council. Not because of the Second Vatican Council. I think Vatican II did a tremendous job in its document.
Yes,
when you read it, it's actually a solid document.
Correct.
What went wrong and how can we fix it? We're going to go into that a little bit. How can we remedy the losses that we face? Yeah,
that's a good question. I guess, as I mentioned before the show, we were just sort of quickly talking, that in the document, Sacrosanctum, or the Constitution, Sacrosanctum Concilium, it mentions in there, it doesn't actually mention, it uses very strong wording that every diocese should institute or set up a music school to educate singers and musicians.
Really?
Yes.
I haven't heard of those before.
Yes, so it's in the document.
I was born after Vatican II.
So in the I don't know if I have it. I probably don't have the Sanctum Concilium with me here. No, I don't. But in there, it actually uses quite strong words, saying that every diocese should set up a music school to educate musicians and choristers within the diocese.
Wow.
And I guess that's probably one of the things that never occurred. It sort of fell on...
Culturally...
It fell on deaf ears. There are some countries countries that did implement it. I know that Poland did implement that. So I know that in Poland, every diocese has a music school.
Wow.
A lot of the music schools are actually run by the Salesians in Poland, but not all of them. I know also it went so far that it's in conjunction with tertiary institutes of music in Poland, where they'll have a church music department which is connected or which follows what the diocese stipulates, that every musician that plays within the diocese must have knowledge of. So they teach them Gregorian chant, they teach them how to play the organ, they teach harmony, which is general music things, teach them how to play the organ up to probably a level of, say, something which is akin to maybe like, if you're doing a bachelor's of performance at the con, maybe an equivalent of third year, ability of playing the organ or something like that.
Yeah. These things are expensive to run.
Yeah, but these are run by each diocese in Poland, and there are music schools as well. I know in Germany as well. Yeah. I don't know if every diocese in Germany has a music school, but I know there are many places where there are music schools where musicians will be sent there, and then when they take up a position in the church, they have to show their diploma that they have, fulfilled, the requirements.
The requirements,
that's correct.
Proficient musician,
Certainly.
Well, we can't do that today.
Certainly, when you do go into those countries and you do, wander around different churches and you do listen to the organists, they are, organ music
obviously
is
you're dealing with a much higher standard in Europe.
Yeah.
In Sydney, Australia, asking for a diploma from an average parishioner who wants to volunteer to sing
Correct.
is not practical because we don't have the numbers.
But it would be
and
nice.
it
would be nice if we. I mean, we do have institutes or whatever that teach things to do with liturgy. You know, whether it's acolytes or things. It would be nice if we had something a little bit more comprehensive
for
musicians. And I do understand that this could be a money issue or whatever. I'm not involved in those things or whatever.
People not. I mean, a lot of the time you go to your average parish, and a lot of the people running the music don't have any knowledge.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that was one of the things that the council, by saying that there should be these schools, was to stop this from happening.
Yeah.
Was for people to have some knowledge of music. I guess too that unfortunately in certainly in the Anglo-Saxon Western world, there's not an importance on music. I mean, music is everywhere. It's on television. We hear it all the time, you know. But we don't see it as being something important or something we want to actually pour money into.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, unfortunately, that whole where you have these amateurs who are. I call myself an amateur, but I have a fair amount of musical knowledge and education and background. Unfortunately, I think in a lot of parishes, it's even lower than amateur. Like they have no musical understanding or even basic musical theory. You know,
I mean, but to give them credit, they are just volunteers.
That's correct.
A lot of the time.
That's correct. But
and it's a great thing for them to do.
But they should be given some sort of support, or
to make them better,
and also
them.
too, where you hear a lot of where people complaining that the music is terrible. You know, it's because of that. I remember being at a parish once. It was a Saturday night vigil mass, and it was before mass, and the group was practicing before mass, which is, you know, not the best thing. I think I try not to. I certainly try not to practice in the church before a mass or whatever. So I never do that with at the traditional mass, but I do help out in the Novus Ordo, and we finish up at least 15 minutes or more before the mass starts, so as to give people time to pray. But there were guitars there, and they were trying to strum it, and they had the whole rhythm incorrect. Yeah. And it was just because they didn't have the basic knowledge of even being able to read the music or you know, what the music was asking them to do. And they just sort of struggled, and they just made a whole mess of the piece, unfortunately. And I think it's...
So what the church should be doing is, and where it can, and there is some great efforts in different dioceses now but should accelerate more, is to educate and further train.
Correct, yeah.
Because if you've come forward as somebody who wants to volunteer, I mean, God bless these people. They want to volunteer. They want to come forward. They want to sing. They want to use their gifts. And in no way are we demonizing them. But we want to achieve their potential so that the quality of the music within the parish improves, and the ability to pray and participate in the liturgy thereby
That's right. So
grows.
The music not being a hindrance is actually...
Exactly.
As you're aware, with our choir, we've got a few choirs at Blacktown, and your lovely wife Akita sings in one of the choirs.
Big shout out to the choir of Pope Benedict the 16th.
Akita has no musical background, and most of the people in that choir don't. So, you know, a huge part of running that choir is, you know, educating, you know, the choristers in regards to being able to sing the chant, read the chant, also catechesis in why we're doing this, where is it from, and stuff like that. So a lot of the topics that we've discussed here, we've probably mentioned to our choristers over a period of, you know, a couple of
10 years,
Yeah, so...
Because Akita's been in the choir for over a decade.
That's correct, yeah.
Which
that choir's been going for quite a long while.
And you're educating people, and I've been learning in the process as well, you know, when things come up, and about, the theological background of different pieces of music, seasons in which you're singing.
Correct.
I mean, it's a real catechesis.
That's correct, yeah.
Again, lex orandi, lex credendi, lex vivendi. We pray is how we believe.
90% of all of our musicians had no knowledge prior to joining the choir. I mean, we are
able to elevate.
We are lucky though that we do have Daniel Nekic, you know, who has a bachelor in music. Myself, that's had many years education within music and stuff like that. We're able to foster and teach these people. So yeah. I think that's probably where, I guess, in a lot of parishes is that they don't have somebody that has the knowledge that then can impart onto to the others. That's
but a good idea, as the Second Vatican Council envisaged.
Doesn't mean that every chorister there has to have a Bachelor of Music or whatever.
But maybe one person on a diocesan level could educate, could group together.
I think the Parramatta Diocese is trying to do something like that.
They're doing a tremendous job.
Yes.
And it will take time.
And I was going to say it's going to take time because we've had a gap of, say, 30-odd years where, or actually no, it's 50 years.
Yeah.
Where it hasn't happened. So it's going to take a while to sort of catch up.
But there are some great efforts, you know, in people.
But I think that's where the music, unfortunately, has faltered in parishes. And also, too, there was a little bit of a thing after the council that the council just sort of said, you know, to keep the chant, do this and do that, but didn't provide any books until something like 4 or 5 years later. And sort of left it like, you know.
I may actually mention Vicar General Father Peter Williams in our episode previously. He did say and mention interestingly that part of what caused this gap or vacuum in the liturgical music was the translation from the Mass was in Latin purely, and everything was sung in Latin. And then when it changed to the vernacular languages, to English, there was just a gap. Nothing was translated.
That's correct.
It took a while.
That's correct. It took. It
slowed everything down.
And I think, unfortunately, other things crept in, which was not supposed to.
Culturally, yeah.
And by the time they got around to producing books in different places, it was all too late.
So it would have been better if they just kept the chant in Latin and then everything else in English.
Correct.
Just to keep that continuity as they started to slowly transition. Yeah. What do we do? Now we're going into we are here on the Catholic Toolbox. And it's time for you to give us some practical tools. Oh. What can we do? We've spoken about the origins of music, its connection to the sacred and helping us. I mean, we're doing all this to pray and achieve the salvation of our soul and get to heaven, participate in the liturgy. Sort of what we're haywire after Vatican II, not because of the Second Vatican Council, but because of the cultural situation. The things happen, you know.
Yeah, that's correct.
But what can we do to take action today? What are some 3 practical tools maybe church initiatives could take up? Individuals, if somebody who's listening here today has a voice, doesn't know much about music, but has the desire to sing and glorify God and elevate the music of their parish or chaplaincy or wherever, what can they do? What are some 3 practical tools?
Yeah, I was going to say, definitely that. If there's somebody out there in parishes that's sort of, interested in music, I'm sure there are ways within their parish to sort of be involved. Also, I think there should be initiatives of setting up some sort of, fundraising, maybe for, in our instance, let's say, with the Latin Mass, we're lucky enough to have 2, qualified musicians that are able to help run and teach and train all the other musicians within our apostolate. Maybe there's some sort of fundraising or initiatives that can be there in a parish where they can, help further educate somebody that has that they can see that has the ability, to learn in regards to music and sort of foster that. I guess that's one thing.
So maybe some initiatives to maybe short courses or
That's
something.
Correct.
Invest in some of your best. If a parish priest is listening, to maybe invest in some people that have shown interest and been there for a while, invest in them so that they can
whether
learn and
whether
educate.
they're singers, organists, guitarists.
Yeah.
Not my favourite instrument,
Yes.
but I mean, I would prefer that guitarist to be strumming something in time and following
That's a whole nother-
rhythmically what's in the music than
Yes.
so yeah, you know, I think that's certainly important. I mean, it can still be done. Those people can still be doing it on a voluntary basis, and that's what we also do in the with the fraternity. All our musicians are volunteers. We're not paid for our our services, so to speak.
Yeah, so it's all volunteer.
Yeah, volunteers. Yeah,
people are doing it to worship God and
that's
elevate,
correct.
Give glory to God. So
yeah, I think whether it's support in any which way, even prayer, praying for the musicians, and whether currently I think the choir of Pope Benedict the 16th is doing a novena for new members.
new choristers.
To join the choir, yeah.
Wow.
So I mean, even things like that. I mean, it doesn't, things like that are even important. So
Should what do you think about this? Because I've been hearing a lot about around Australia. People from certain choirs, whether a Latin Mass choir or a choir that sings sacred music, parish hopping a little bit to help certain parish priests.
well, I do that as well.
You do that, yeah, exactly.
I do that, helping
that's a practical
parishes out,
thing
yes.
I've been noticed. That's a practical tool or practical thing I've noticed. And other people I know,
Correct.
And I've
I
seen
guess
them at
that's
a random
another-
parish. And I said,
yes.
"What are you doing here?" They're like, "Oh, I sing at the I sing at the 11 o'clock just to get the parish started and used to sacred music." So there's a lot of people
Correct,
doing what
yeah.
you do,
Yes.
jumping around a little bit just to help and certain parishes
Correct,
with
yeah.
priests who are aware and want to actually make these changes, accelerate these changes and help their parish
that
to
was
get used to it.
the Novus Ordo parish that I help out. That I was specifically asked by the group if I could teach them how to sing the hymns that they needed to sing, so which meant producing music for them, giving them some sort of education.
So you
and
could
sort
run
of
a
basic-
workshop.
Well, basically, our choir practice for the first, say, 3 years were mini workshops every time. A basic of being able to read music, being so is the chorus, and now we would practice every Saturday. Now they don't need to.
Yeah.
So they're all sent the music beforehand, and we're just singing simple hymns here. We're not singing Gregorian chant or
Just simple hymns to get started.
or fancy polyphony. Even though now we are doing motets, one motet a mass.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But some Gregorian chants are quite easy.
Correct.
Like
yeah.
the Kyrie.
We were doing one of the things that we sometimes will do is a communion antiphon.
Okay, sure.
Because it's probably one of the musical things where people are going up to communion. They don't want to be focused on a screen or a hymn book as they're walking the thing.
Yeah.
Even though the documents sort of say the importance of music or music to be sung during communion, it is very hard for the congregation to be, singing, walking up, receiving our Lord, and then they're in, So we would either do, say, the communion antiphon in chant, either in English, or actually we most of the times do it in English, or we'll do a motet during that time. So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
So we've eventually, originally it was just 5 hymns, we did at the Mass, but now we've sort of, over the years, we've sort of grown to the point where we can, do something a little bit more complex and sort of, start to fulfill what the documents are sort of saying, like doing the chant or doing, sacred polyphony.
And I think that's
it's only, it's only a little thing. It's only one thing within the
one
the
thing
Mass.
at a time. But I think honestly, that's the best practical tool that we can take out of this episode is people like yourself, other people who are listening. And I know there's other great people doing helping out parishes. They may go to Latin Mass, be part of a choir, but they volunteer some additional time to help a friend who's a parish priest 3 or 4 suburbs down the road
I know
with
that,
his parish.
Yeah, I know, like
to get his parish started.
The cathedral choir at Parramatta, I know there are a few choristers there that help out in
And they do tremendous work
other
there.
parishes.
And
as
people
well.
from other choirs and other Latin Mass choirs. And
I think also, if you're in that situation where you do have somebody that comes in from outside that has this knowledge that you can learn from, if you're able to take up the, the possibility that you can learn from somebody that sort of especially come in to help and teach or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be a very effective way to spread the knowledge. And these little workshops where there's another organisation, I think, I know the Australian Sacred Music Association.
Correct,
I heard a while back, were running some
workshops,
which were very effective. And I saw some videos of it. It's fantastic. You had even parishioners attending these workshops who want to, because again, we're here to encourage congregational singing as well.
Correct.
We want the congregation to participate and people learning, how to chant.
Actually, I was going to say that's another thing too, in regards to some of the things. Even though, just because you're somebody sitting in the congregation doesn't necessarily mean that you can't be a part of these things. And that was one of the things that we aren't doing at Blacktown yet, but we did do in the early days in Lewisham, was we actually ran a little program for the congregation, teaching them how to sing, Mass 11, Credo 2, or whatever like that. So as they were able to join in, they knew the different melodies and things like that. And I did that even within my own parish at Our Lady of Roses at St Mary's when I was playing there for a while, introducing new hymns. Over several weeks, sort of going through a hymn, teaching it, phrase by phrase, sort of just repeating it, and then, they have a new hymn under their belt, and the whole congregation is, singing the thing instead of it just being thrust upon them with no preparation or whatever.
Here we're preparing people, and there's something beautiful about that, and I'm sure you hear my beautiful voice when I'm at the Latin Mass on Sundays. I try to participate with the choir from a distance, so I don't know if you hear my voice in the background. But it's been a great discussion, and I think there's a lot to take out of this episode, and there's a lot to take action with, and we've left people with some good practical tools. But thank you so much for being here tonight on the show. Thank you, George.
Thanks for having me.
Greg, and for those who want to tune in and re-access this podcast, subscribe to the podcast. Go to The Catholic Toolbox, wherever you get your podcast. That is The Catholic Toolbox, wherever you get your podcast, or go to thecatholictoolboxshow.com. That is thecatholictoolboxshow.com. Thank you for tuning into the show, The Art of Practical Catholicism. I'm your host and founder, George Manassa. Until next week, God bless. Take care and take action.
In this era of grave spiritual crisis, it is not enough to simply know about your Catholic faith. That is why we need a Catholic toolbox to equip us with the practical skills necessary to live our Catholic faith to reach our ultimate goal, which is heaven for all eternity. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. for the Catholic Toolbox as we hand you the tools to go forth, live the faith, and change our modern world today. Live on the Voice of Charity.